quiet knock on my door. "Morning, Bee," Mom whispers. She sits on the edge of my bed, dressed in her short-sleeved paramedic uniform. It has stretchy sides and extra space for the baby, because during her last shift before the wedding, she picked up the next-sized uniform, but it was still tight across her belly and baggy everywhere else. So she knocked on her supervisor's door and said she needed a maternity medium before she popped out of these buttons while administering CPR. 3, she whispers to me. I sigh and clear my throat and think of 3 things I'm grateful for. 1, that Maximilian's still in my class. 2, new teachers. And 3, real soccer league, even if it's a boys' team. Mom smiles and says, "Good ones. Now get up, 6th grader." So I throw back the comforter, but this is not how the first morning of school is supposed to go. It's supposed to be a quick shower, a bowl of corn pops, and out the door with Maximilian down the tramped-down path to school. Not this year. This year, it's a line for the shower, and somehow I'm second to last. It's gloppy oatmeal that's been sitting in the pot, brushing my teeth in a sink next to Bryce Valentine, and having wet, out-of-shower hair in front of people other than my mom. "Your hair is down," Bryce says. "You're brilliant," I reply. "It looks weird." "You look weird." Mom says to cut it out and kisses the top of my head. "I'll see you tomorrow morning," she says. "Have a great first day." She works a 24-hour shift, then has 2 days off, then works another 24 hours. I used to like that schedule because it meant she was home a lot, and when she wasn't, Grandma Bee would sleep over and Aunt Tam would check in on me. But now, I'll just be here with Wendell and Cameron and Tucker and Bryce and Dodger and Roscoe and Fred. Wendell's wearing his hardware polo shirt with his name stitched on it, and a pair of jeans with paint smudged on them, which is the unofficial uniform at the hardware store he manages in town. He hugs Mom and says, "Be safe. Drive slowly." Mom slugs him in the arm and says, "Kind of defeats the point of an ambulance." They put their mugs in the sink, and Mom grabs her overnight duffel, and they both head out to the driveway. Their car doors slam at the same time, and they start their engines and drive off down Evergreen Road. My hair is hard to put up when it's wet, but the bus comes in 6 minutes, and I never wear it down at school, so I make a messy blob with the rubber band around my wrist. Then we all grab our backpacks and head out. Cameron and Tucker turn left for the bus stop that goes to the high school, and I walk 3 steps behind Bryce toward the bus stop to our school. When we get to the end of the road, Bryce gives Morris a high five, and Eliana is already there too, waiting with her mom, who is taking 100 pictures. Eliana's wearing jeans that are skinny to her legs, with brown boots that stop at her ankle. But not real boots, like winter boots or mud season boots. Her boots are soft-looking and have a zipper down the side, and little wooden heels that make her even taller, and they look like they would wilt in a 1-inch puddle. Her hair is wet and down, long over her shoulders. We look at each other and kind of half smile, and for 1 second, I think she probably won't even sign up for soccer when she finds out it's a boys' team. Then I hear Morris say, "So wait, are you and Bee officially twins now?" Bryce tells him to shut up, but he doesn't say it harsh enough, like Morris better shut up or else. "Isn't that what a brother and sister with the same birthday are called?" he continues, laughing. Bryce is just standing there like a dummy because he'll never really say anything to Morris. But there's a fire burning hot in my belly, and my hands reach out and yank Morris in by the straps of his new backpack. His face is 6 inches from my face, which is good, because I have a lesson he needs to hear loud and clear. He's not my brother. I push him away before Eliana's mom gets to me. "Excuse me," she says, then goes on about how we don't use our hands, blah, blah, blah. I keep my mouth shut. But really, I want to tell her I already have a mom, and a whole bunch of other people and animals pretending to be my family. So if she wants to butt in, she can tell Morris to shut his mouth. Morris shakes his backpack back in place and mumbles something about how maybe I'm actually the brother and Bryce must be the sister. Bryce laughs him off like it's no big deal, but I shoot him a look as the bus pulls up. Aliana gives her mom a hug and gets on first and sits in the front. I'm next, and I sit in the middle by myself. Then Morris and Bryce go to the last seat in the back, and Morris tells the kids sitting there to move, and they do, and then he tells Bryce to push into the window. I'm thinking about Maximilian walking down our path by himself right now, and it makes me mad that I have to start my day telling Morris to keep his mouth shut and listening to the new girl's mom and riding on this stinky bus. The teachers are waiting outside the school by the bus line, holding posters to lead us into our new classrooms. I look for the sign that says Ms. Blaze and Ms. Kravitz, and I push through the crowd and go stand next to Maximilian. I let my shoulder just barely touch his to let him know I'm there. Hey, he says. Hey. The walkie-talkies don't work, I nod. I know. Ms. Blaze starts counting down the line. I follow her finger. A 7th grader named Tess, who was on my rec team 2 years ago, is in our class. I heard she quit the school team last year because she didn't want to play with the boys. Fern is in our class too, but not Nell. Then, Ms. Blaze's finger counts Kenny and Morris and Bryce. And even though I was 99% sure they would all be in my class again, it sinks in deep, right into that fire in my belly, when I see them there at the back of the line. At the end of last year, Mom and Wendell called the school and tried to get Bryce and me in different classes for 6th grade. It's school policy to separate siblings when they can, which actually happens a lot since there are only 3 middle school classes and they're multi-age, 6th through 8th grade. And even though Bryce Valentine and I are not siblings, I hoped the school would split us up anyway. But we're both supposed to be in a special class that has 2 teachers, and there's only one of those. So we're stuck together, just like we have been since 2nd grade. Kenny and Morris get the special 2-teacher class, too. Then I see Aliana walking up to the front like she's never seen a line before. She tells the teachers her name and says she wants to double-check that she's in the right place. Ms. Blaze looks down at her clipboard and says,
Aliana Absalon. Yes, right here, top of the list.
I roll my eyes. Aliana doesn't go back to the end of the line. She stays at the front on the other side of Maximilian until Ms. Blaze says, Okay, all here. And Ms. Kravitz says, Follow us. Our classroom doesn't have any desks. It has tables and benches and a big rug area with its own corner library and a couch and 2 big chairs like the ones we used to have in the condo, and little fold-up camping chairs stacked on the shelf next to bins and bins of books. Ms. Blaze tells us that this will be our homeroom and our English class, and that we can find a seat at one of the tables. Maximilian and I take a table near the front, and Kenny rushes to the couch.
At a table,
Ms. Blaze repeats. Kenny sighs and tosses his backpack on a seat toward the back. Morris and Bryce join him. Aliana sits at the table next to Maximilian and me, and Laurel and Georgia, who are both 8th graders, immediately join her and start asking where she got her boots and where she's from. And Aliana switches her hair from one shoulder to the other and says, Brooklyn. Laurel and Georgia just kind of stare at her. You're from New York City? Why'd you move? I'm wondering the same thing. My mom can do her job over the computer, and she wanted a quieter, slower life, she says. So, here we are. I want to say a quieter, slower life? What's that supposed to mean? But Ms. Blaze is calling for our attention and telling us to take out a notebook and something to write with, which makes a couple of kids groan. But I'm good with that, because I'm not one for first-day icebreaker games.
My name is Ms. Blaze.
She writes her name at the top of her own notebook and projects it on the smartboard. Then she reads us a story about a girl named Esperanza, whose name means hope. And even though I don't understand it all, I like the way it sounds. Now it's our turn, she tells us, to write everything we know about our own names.
You can make a list, write a poem, draw a picture. Tell us what you know about it, what you don't know about it, if you like it or don't.
Then she starts a timer and says,
4 minutes.
Ms. Kravitz is helping the table behind us get started. She whispers a few words, but then it's quiet. Maximilian taps the eraser of his pencil 4 times against the table before he starts writing. Be embers, I start. Then I keep going. And when the time is up, I actually kind of like what I wrote. It doesn't sound as music-y and poemish as that Esperanza story Ms. Blaze read to us, but it felt easy to write, and it takes up almost a quarter of a page, which is the most I've ever written in the first 4 minutes of a school year ever. We share at our tables, and I tell Maximilian about being named after my Grandma B, which is okay by me because Grandma B is strong and funny and puts M&Ms in pancakes. Maximilian already knows all this, and I know that his mom gave him the name Maximilian and that it means greatest, and that even if she got everything else wrong, at least she got that right, because Maximilian is the greatest. Then, Ms. Blaze tells us we're all going to share something from our work. Some kids groan again.
It can be just one word,
she tells us.
Or one line, or the whole thing. Whatever you feel comfortable telling us.
Hands shoot in the air. Not mine. Ms. Kravitz calls on Eliana first. And Eliana doesn't just read a line from her seat. She stands up and reads the whole darn thing. I'm Eliana Absalon. People call me A. I look down at my paper and roll my eyes. Then she starts reading to us about her 2 grandmas, Ailey and Anna, and how her parents named her after both of them. I bite my tongue in the back of my mouth because I want to shout that she copied me, except of course she had to go showing off with 2 grandmas and 100 syllables. But I'll tell you one thing, I wouldn't want a fancy name like Eliana anyway. She's reading from her page about how Absalon was an important name way back from some lords in Britain or something. Ms. Blaze is nodding her head, and when Eliana finishes, she claps her hands and says,
Thank you for sharing, eh?
Laurel and Georgia say, Good job, A. And just like that, everyone is calling her A. But I'll tell you another thing. I'm not. Fern stands up next and says in a quiet voice that she'll just share one line. My name is from Charlotte's Web, she says. My mom's favorite book. I nodded her like, that's cool, because I didn't know that. Kenny scoffs and says under his breath, You were named after a pig? And Maura starts laughing and snorting like a pig. I whip around and see Bryce hiding little laughs behind his hand. Then Ms. Kravitz stands up and says,
Oh, you got that quite wrong, young man. You can make it your homework tonight to find out the pig's name in Charlotte's Web.
Kenny smirks and mumbles, Whatever.
Not whatever,
Ms. Kravitz says.
It's her name.
Then she turns to Fern.
Thank you for sharing, Fern. I love that book, too.
Morris and Bryce are still muffling little laughs, and Ms. Blaze says,
And you two, you can make that your homework as well, since you think it's so funny.
And if I were more of a hugger, I'd want to hug her. And Ms. Kravitz, too. Because for the first time in 100 years, Kenny and Morris and Bryce Valentine aren't getting away with something.
And you can go next, please,
Ms. Kravitz says, pointing to Kenny. He doesn't stand, but he mutters, My dad gave me his name. That's why I'm Kenny. Kenny Jr.
Thank you for sharing, Kenny,
Ms. Kravitz says, and she says it like she really means it, like Kenny Jr. just told her something really important. Kenny nods. When it's Maximilian's turn, he taps his pencil eraser 4 times on the table, stands up, and says, "Maximilian, not Max." Kenny and Morris and Bryce don't laugh out loud, but I can feel them smirking. I can feel it all the way from the back of the room and through my Carhartt overalls and straight into the fire in my belly. I want to tell them they better keep their mouths shut and that Maximilian likes to be called Maximilian because it's an even 10 letters, unlike Max. But I think that will make them want to smirk and laugh harder. So I just whisper, "Good job." Then it's my turn to share. But when I look down at my paper, I don't know which part to read. "B. Embers," I say. Then I skip the whole part about Grandma B, which feels bad, but who wants to hear about one grandma when they just heard a whole page about 2 grandmas? So I read the last part. Embers, like a fire, ready to spark. Ms. Blaze nods and says, "Wonderful," and thanks me for sharing. A 7th grader shares that her dad just liked the way Quinn sounded. Then Georgia says her mom let her older sister pick her name. She shrugs and says, "It could have been a lot worse. She was obsessed with My Little Pony. I could be Little Pony Ludlow." That makes everyone laugh. Mac is named after his grandpa, who works at the hardware store with Wendell. And Wyatt says his mom has a thing about W's. His brother is Warren, and his sister is Winnie. Maddie's real name is Madeline, which is also her mom's name. When it's Bryce's turn, he looks down at his paper and says in the smallest voice I've ever heard him use, "Bryce was my mom's maiden name." Ms. Blaze thanks him for sharing, and I turn around kind of slowly so he doesn't notice, and I look at him because I didn't know that about his name, and I didn't know that Bryce could have a small voice, and that he could talk about his mom on the first day in a new class. After everyone shares, Ms. Kravitz says,
"We'll certainly remember your names now."
Then our classroom door flies open and Principal Measley walks in. He didn't even knock.
"Sorry for the interruption,"
he announces.
"In addition to being your principal, I am also the boys' soccer coach. I'm posting the sign-ups in the hallway. Write your name by end of day if you want to play."
He holds up a list. Then he leaves. Ms. Blaze waits for the door to close and says,
"What he meant to say was, welcome back. We're so excited for another year with you."
Everyone laughs, and Eliana leans over and whispers, "Who's the girls' coach?" The bell rings. I shrug and tell her we just have a boys' team because not enough girls play. "We're allowed to sign up if we want," I say. I look down at her skinny jeans and flimsy, fashiony boots and add, "You probably don't want to, though. All the girls end up quitting anyway." I don't tell her that I'm going to be the first girl that sticks, not her. She scrunches up her eyebrows. "No girls' team?" Ms. Kravitz quickly hands out our schedules and walks us down the hallway to our next class. She comes to every class with us. That's part of the special 2-teacher class thing. Eliana is at the front of the line, but she peels off when we pass the soccer sign-up sheet and writes A on the list. I peel off too and write B on the next line. Later, when we pass by the list on our way to the lunchroom, I can see that the sign-up is so full of names already that kids had to start writing in more numbers all the way down to 23. I put my finger right on the page to count the girls. A, B, Fern, Nell, Kara, Jamie, Quinn. 7. That's more girls than ever before. At lunch, I sit next to Maximilian. Across from us, Tess is unwrapping a sandwich. "Hey, is it true you quit soccer last year?" I ask her. She nods and says it was no fun on the boys' team. Principal Measley basically ignores the girls, and so then the boys do too. They never pass. I tell her there are 7 girls already signed up this year, and I'm thinking it might be harder to ignore 7. She looks down at her sandwich and says, I babysit sometimes after school now. I shrug and say, okay, but really, I'm thinking that sounds awful. We're not supposed to leave our class table during lunch, but Nell sneaks over and squeezes in next to Fern, and she waves to me too. Did you have a good summer? She asks. I think about the wedding and Wendell and Cameron and Tucker and Bryce and Dodger and Roscoe and Fred and the moving van and leaving the condos and Maximilian and having to take the bus. But I just say, yeah, it was okay. My milk carton is sticking, and I have to poke my finger in to open the drinking spout, which is gross and annoying, and I'm hoping no one is paying attention. When I look up, Nell is smiling at me, and I don't want her to say anything about the carton, so I ask, did you see how many girls are on the soccer list? Georgia hears me and looks up. How many? I hold up 7 fingers, and Mac, who is watching us from the end of the table, nearly spurts his milk.
7?
He says.
We're going to have to get another bench.
Kenny laughs.
No, they'll quit.
Tess rolls her eyes, and Georgia tells them to shut their mouths and that they know nothing. They listen because she's in 8th grade, but I can tell they're still snickering. I have to tell Emmy, Georgia says. Then she scans the lunchroom, checking out where the aides are, and when they're not looking, she sneaks off to another class table. At the end of the day, on our way back to Ms. Blaze's room, I check out the soccer list again. It's so full of names now that it's down to the bottom, and it makes me stop completely, right in the middle of the hall, and Maximilian slams into me. B, he says. And I tell him I'm sorry because I'm pretty sure I messed up his stepping, and he had to do 2 left steps in a row. He's breathing hard like he's trying to catch his breath, and Morris is laughing and saying,
Everyone take cover! Max is about to blow!
And I want to slug him for calling Maximilian Max because he just shared about that this morning, and it makes everything worse, and I have to sneak up between the thumb and forefinger squeeze. Then Ms. Kravitz is there, and she's counting by 8s. And I don't know why, but it's working, because Maximilian is with her by 64. But I'm doing my own counting. I'm counting down the girls on the list. A, B, Fern, Nell, Kara, Jamie, Quinn, Georgia, Emmy, Micah, Tess. 11. A whole team. After dismissal, I carry the sign-up list to Principal Measley's office. It says do not disturb on the door. I give it a good knock.
Busy,
he calls through the door. Aliana's behind me, even though I didn't invite her to tag along, because she still can't believe we've never had a girls' team before. Guess we'll try tomorrow, she says. Maybe that's what an Absalon would do. Just try again later. But I'm an Embers, and Embers knocks again.
Busy,
he calls louder, and his secretary, Ms. Landry, asks if she can help me with something. I got this, I tell her, and knock again. I hear his rolly chair slide toward the door. Then it opens. When he sees us outside, he stands up and says,
I said.
But I shove the list toward him. 11 girls. He takes the list, looks it over, folds it, and says,
You're going to miss your bus.
I have 100 things I want to say to him, like, that's it, and 11's a whole team, and who's our coach, and when's our first practice? But before I can say anything, he takes a step forward, which makes us stumble 2 steps back and out of his office. And then his door is shut, and we're on the other side, and he's calling out,
Andrea, office is closed.
Ms. Landry kind of smiles at us like, sorry, and I kind of smile back at her like, sorry. Sorry your desk has to be so close to Measley, and you have to listen to him all day. Try again tomorrow, Ms. Landry says, and gives us a nod. On the way to the bus, I'm telling Fern and Tess and Georgia how Principal Measley didn't say anything about our 11-girl team, and how he just folded the list like he didn't even care. He's totally going to make us play with the boys again, Tess says. She tucks her thumbs under the straps of her backpack as we walk outside. If he does, I quit. Back to babysitting. Same, says Georgia. And I know Emmy will too. And that gets my heart beating fast because I don't want anyone thinking about quitting yet. Tess sees her dad's car and says she has to go. She runs off, and Georgia and Fern get on their bus and say they'll see us tomorrow. Our bus is the second in line, and as we walk toward it, I'm trying to ignore the clicking of Aliana's heels on those good-for-no-season boots. "What position do you play?" she asks. "Center midfield," I tell her. She stops, fast, and puts her hands on her hips and looks me right in the eyes and says, "That's my position." "Number 10, we both say at the same time. And I'll tell you one thing. She might have been center midfield and number 10 in Brooklyn, but that's my position here, and there's no way I'm giving it up to some 2 Grandmod Summer Travel League people call me A. Aliana.